today we are going to go ahead and start the process of putting a pin in the 2020-2021 school year. We're going to look at what we did over the course of this year, what it worked, what didn't work, what are we never, ever going to do again, and what do we need to keep. It was a challenging year.
COVID, right?
Distance learning, hybrid learning, changes in policy mid-year, changes in policy midweek.
So when I think about COVID, I think what it did is effectively is disrupt our comfort zone, right? And put us into some cognitive dissonance. Our brain had to rapidly try to make sense of this and come up with plans and strategies that may have adjusted over the year. But we haven't had that kind of disruption in education for over 50 years. So it was not only a struggle for teachers, but a struggle for our administrators, struggle for our superintendents, struggle for our state leaders, even to think about, hey, how are we going to deal with this? And some administrators dealt well with it. Some of them didn't and put a lot of strain on their teachers. So it's just been a learning year all around.
It was a terrible situation all the way around because it was a disruption. People get sedentary in their plans and strategies, and they have a good grasp of what they're good at and what they're not. So now people were put in different places, equal footing, and it just drove home how resilient and how diverse and how dynamic teachers are. They conquered. It may not be what they wanted, but they didn't quit. They fought, they clawed, they created some wonderful opportunities for learning. They've made some changes that I hope they don't conflate the crazy year with the changes that were successful and throw it all out together. I hope that they have a good chance to look at what was working and keep that stuff. So.
Well, and I think that we're never going to separate the emotional turmoil that it took to our families, ourselves, this going through a pandemic. And so I think it's going to be hard to separate that from what did work. So to me, it's like when I think back on the year and kind of some of the traumatic places and things that happened that occurred, family and friends being ill, trying to keep myself from being ill, I'll always kind of connect it with distance learning. And so to me, it's going to be a little bit of a struggle to separate and really separate the emotion and find that the good that I need to move forward.
Well, I think that the good may not be apparent right now because we're looking at it still in it. I think it's going to be one of those that when we take some time away from it and we begin to look back on the growth that we did see happen, not only in our students, but in us as educators and then us as just individuals, that there has been a lot of really great things that have come out of this last school year. And I think regardless of COVID and the pandemic, it's almost the month of May. And I think as educators, we all are in this place, usually around this time of year anyway, where we begin to think about, okay, what went well? What do I need to focus on for the summer? And what are some things that I definitely want to bring back next school year? And I think that as we begin to approach as we begin to kind of approach what's next with that line of thinking, we already do that anyway. It's just something that we're kind of ingrained with. I was having this conversation with a coworker the other day. I said, it's the month of May and I'm already thinking about, while I may not be in the classroom on a traditional teacher calendar, I'm still in that mindset of a teacher calendar and I still think in operations of a school calendar. So I'm thinking, okay, well, what things do I need to focus on this summer as an individual? And then what things do I need to be prepared for to help math educators grow as well to be ready for August? And so I think our brains just naturally go through this cycle anyway, because we've have learned to do that over the many years of being on a campus.
Well, in order to try to separate the emotion from the practice, we had this opportunity to look at the 7 stages professional learning teams that was adapted from the journal article One Step at a Time by Harry Graham and Bill Ferriter. I'll go through the stages real quick, and we'll talk about them on the other side, because I don't think that we as educators generally do all 7. I think we do the first 4 really well. First, stage 1, fill in the time, coming up with activities and things that we put in. Stage 2, share personal practice. Stage 3, plan, 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 plan. Stage 4, developing common assessments. Stage 5, analyze student learning. Stage 6, adapting instruction to student needs. And stage 7, reflecting on instruction. Like I said, I feel that as educators and PLCs, we do a great job of stages 1 through 4. We get to the test and, we're all in. Some more successful PLCs do analyze student work and learning, and high functioning ones will talk about differentiation and adapting to student needs. But I think where we break down all together is that stage 7, reflecting. We just run out of time because of the next thing's coming. So this is the end of the school year. We can look at some really big things going on in our programs, things that were directly emphasized due to our current situation, and decide what we need to keep and need to dismiss or adapt. So what I'd like to do is, we did a poll on the Slow Twitter chat asking what will we leave behind from 2021 in the school year if something else put in the chat. Nobody put anything else. The choices were Zoom or Teams, digital tools, asynchronous learning, and virtual PDs. And with a 50% to 33%, it was Zoom and Teams beating out virtual PDs. So let's look at those 2 or 1, I don't know time what time allows, and go through those last 3 steps of the 7 steps and talk about what was good, what was bad, and what we need to keep.
David, I know that everybody has some Zoom fatigue. It's a thing, right? Zoom fatigue. But to me, the Zoom experience, one of the things that I think that it gives to students is it gives them the front of the class experience. And, the teacher is right there. I'm right here. I'm not at the back of the class. Now, I may choose to be off task, we'll say, but I still have that, like, I am directly in front of the teacher feel. And in that, sometimes that means we've seen that some students felt that gave them opportunity to participate more. They had the freedom to, and kind of the anonymity a little bit, to say things that they may not have in the class, where the person beside them was right there, maybe potentially making fun of them or, whatever. So I think that that's something about Zoom that I think is positive. And I think some schools are going to go offer a virtual option next year. So I think that is something, because of those reasons, and you can expand on it more. There might be other reasons too, that this is a way of learning that was effective for some students.
Yeah, I saw that in action yesterday. I had an opportunity to observe a class, and those students were engaged. Now, when I looked at the chat, I was only seeing 5 or 6 kids who were broadcasting to everybody. But when I talked to the teacher afterwards, she's like, oh yeah, 10 more were like sending me direct messages. They never sent stuff to the whole group, specifically because they were afraid they were going to be wrong. I kept hearing her saying, good answer. And then she would cite the child. And then more kids towards the end were starting to do broadcast to everybody because they got that affirmation that, yes, you're correct. So the teacher was able to leverage the chat feature and direct messaging to a more positive affirmation place by giving kids direct feedback on that they're doing good. Some kids didn't need the positive affirmation of being right or risking an opportunity to be wrong. Some kids did. And she was able to leverage that to a high advantage. And that was, I thought was kind of cool. You're afraid to raise your hand if you're in the middle of class, but you can do it and chat and no one else knows.
Yeah, I mean, anonymity is a big thing. Well, along with that, David, is that we had some students that chose to maybe have their screen on, but they weren't actually there with the learning. They're off doing something else or talking with their friends, drawing a picture. I don't know, but they do the anonymity that provided some students to be more engaged, provided a cover for other students to be less engaged. And so I think this happens in the classroom as well, is like when you have them all face to face, you know that some of the students are engaged and some of them aren't. So to me, it's about, regardless of whether it's on Zoom or in the classroom, I'm going to have those kids who are not with me. And so it's thinking about, how do I need to adjust my instruction to engage more kids? As these kids come back to our classroom after they haven't been as tuned in as they could have been, that's some work that we're going to have to face in the coming year.
Oh, because I honestly think that our children's experiences with Zoom this year are positives. Both of our children, our seniors, were distance learners this year. Mm-hmm. And my daughter was able to keep a high GPA. It fit her style better, but I think it was a personal thing. It worked good for her. More so than I remember her sophomore year when it was just brutal. Like she broke, I don't want to say broke, she dislocated a kneecap and was out of school for 2 weeks. They had no vehicle to give her direct instruction. It was just do these worksheets. If that would have happened this year, she wouldn't have missed a beat. And that's something I think moving forward that we need to keep an eye on.
Well, yeah, and I agree with that. So my daughter, her experiences with Teams, so similar to Zoom, and it was a really positive experience for her because she could, especially like when she needed to take an assessment or she had to ask a question from the teacher, she was able to not just attend the class period that she was supposed to be in, but if for some reason she had a question later on in the day, she could go into any one of the classrooms. So let's say her economics teacher was first period, and maybe she was working on whatever project or assignment or task, but maybe at 2:00 in the afternoon, she was like, man, I really still have a question about this. She could still access her teacher's class at that point, as long as it wasn't his conference period, to then come into the class to see what, could he help her at that point. So it actually provided her more access to the teacher than normal, which I thought was really pretty neat. And teachers have become more available for their students to be able to, help support them in whatever their questions may be. And what I love about that is that sometimes I may not know what questions I have in the moment, but when I begin to think about what I just learned, and as I process a little longer, so maybe it takes me longer to process something, then I can always come back to the teacher that same day versus having to wait to the following day. And I did find that was really cool to see her become a little bit more empowered, especially with that relationship with her teachers, being able to have that touch point as often as she needed. And that's something that has been very different in the course of her entire educational career at this point. So I would say that has been really valuable because she's a super quiet kid, and being able to have the confidence to do that has been really, really cool to see on the parent side.
I'm glad you brought up that processing piece, Michelle, because I do feel that that's a positive of kind of virtual or distance learning, because in the classroom, we got to process right there in front of everybody. And some kids process quickly and some kids don't. And so and I think I'm a slow processor. So looking back on my school experience, if I'd had the opportunity to pause or to say, hold on a second, let me think about that again, maybe even rewind it if it was on video and hear it one more time, that I think that would have been helpful to me. I can't even imagine how kids are experiencing school right now from their perspective. I wish I could have a little insight. And so thank you for bringing that forward today.
So I guess the big question on the stage 5 is, are students learning what they're supposed to be learning? And looking at observations of classrooms and seeing what my own children are experiencing, the answer is yes, but they're learning it in a totally different way. Where I think that might be the rub here. We're giving the students a total different experience, but we're looking through the lens of the previous years as assessing that experience. And we need to, as educators, need to adjust like our expectations. Like, what do we expect this to happen and what to look like? And moving forward, how do we measure that next year? Because if we come back to the face-to-face classrooms all the time and don't see what we expect, do we judge that as a failure? Do we have to modify our expectations to what we see? Because we definitely can't go into next year and say they didn't learn anything, because that's just a waste of time. Things like pre-assessment are going to be necessary next year, period. We have to know what they don't know and don't know. And
David, can I say something that you brought up before we move on that I think is really important, is that you talking about some people are still looking at this through the old lens and not looking at it through a new lens. And so I feel like there have been some resistors of change, even though it was like it was coming anyway because that's what's happening. And so they really haven't changed the perspective or the lenses that they're looking at some things with, that they're looking at through, well, the old way was working. Well, was it? I think honestly that this disruption has really brought to light some things that were really never working, but it exposed how badly they weren't working. And so it is a total shift in thinking and total shift in, we have evidence now that kids learn differently than ever before, and you guys have talked about those different ways that they have. And so I think it's really important to keep that idea, is like, are we really looking at what happened this year through the right lens?
all right, I think if we could talk about this forever, but let's go on to stage 6, adapting instruction to the needs of students. Over the course of the year, the whole year was adapting. But the question is, were you adapting to the students or were you adapting to the situation? Let's look at some of the changes that we had to naturally make in order to adapt, and then just talk about them. What is something that we saw as a change that was forced this year that we see as a positive, or we see as addressing a need that helps students?
So I will say that not only with students, but I'm also going to speak on the behalf of adults too. Sometimes we give too much. We give a 60-minute lesson that is way too much. Or we give a 6-hour PD that is chock full of a ton of things. And we leave, or the students leave, not really sure about what the learning was for that moment. They're still not quite sure what they were supposed to grasp. So I think the biggest change is the intentionality of what is the one thing they must be able to know and do today that's going to impact what's coming next. That's been the biggest shift that I've seen, is that, look, I have especially the beginning of the school year, majority of my students, let's say, are remote and we're teaching online. I can't give them all these things online because, one, it takes longer to plan online, and to convey the message I need to convey is a lot of work. And sometimes I can only capture their attention for so many minutes. So how do I use that time a little bit more efficiently to get them to where I need them to be today? And then how can I use that to further their learning tomorrow? And that I think has been the biggest change of really being super intentional about what does the standard say and how am I going to approach that today and what tools can I use to help them. And I think the same on the adult side too, is as a person that has developed professional learning, what do they need to know right now? What's one thing that's going to impact their learning the most, have the greatest impact? And I think that has been one of the things I've seen with my daughter as well, is that her teachers have narrowed the focus just a little bit more. And I can tell based on the assignments, the projects that she has been doing. So anyway, so I've seen her teachers bundle the standards and really focus on the most important standard to really drive home, and how can her projects or her assignments also cover the same stuff, but not feeling like they have to cover everyone individually. So planning, narrowing the focus, being more intentional about the outcomes.
Can I add to that, Michelle? Because one of the things I think that has been a real positive this year as far as adapting instructional needs to students is that teachers sought out ways where they could see what the students were doing. So the tools that really where they could monitor kids' papers like all at once. So if I think about in the classroom walking around, looking, how is this person doing and how is this person doing? But if I could see 4 students at once or all of them, that would be great. And then I can kind of then begin to select students for discussion or see who needs an additional information really easily. And so to me, that is a benefit that Jamboard and these technology tools allow us better access to how the students are thinking and how they're working through a problem or even an assignment.
I was looking at a recent observation and I saw a teacher. There's an app called TeacherMade. And basically you convert a Word document that's like a worksheet to an interactive step-by-step process to go through. So her problem was keeping the kids engaged in the lecture. So what she would do is I'm going to give you notes and then we'll ask these things together as a student inquiry working together. She could monitor directly the kids were engaged. By seeing that resource, it would give her the percentages of the kids doing, and she could tell when they disengaged. So it was just it was something that was so elegant and simple. So I mean, she still had the kids taking notes. She still had the kids listening to lecture and answering a lot of questions. She, did a really good job. And that's where I saw the direct message versus the online. But she also had that extra resource. So she could literally put her finger on the point in the lecture where kids were disengaged and knew where she had to pick up because of where they had turned off. So it was like a really cool way to address that issue of, okay, where did they tune out? How do I go back and fill in the holes that I know are coming? And specifically, what examples didn't they do? Because I always love to throw those questions in on assessments.
That's one of those things that you hope the teacher brings with them going into the next school year, because they learn so much more about how to gauge where their students are at. And my guess is the teacher probably did that pre-pandemic as well. But
the baby, she's a rookie.
She's a rookie. So then what a great lesson that this teacher has learned about how to monitor and adjust instruction, how to take where the students are at and help to move them forward versus telling them where they should be at and then telling them exactly how to move forward. So I think it's really is a great skill that she was able to hone in a way that is valuable, whether we're online, whether we're in person. So I think that's one that definitely will come with her. And how to effectively help students take notes. What does that look like? Are they guided notes? Are they fill in the blanks? Hopefully not. But so much value came out of that because she was pushed in a way that, or I'm gonna say the teacher was pushed in a way that allowed for opportunity for students to buy into the lesson, to buy into the learning. And I think that that's really one of the other shifts too. I know you said to narrow it to one, but sometimes we see students as, well, I'm the teacher, you're the student. You do what I say because I say you do it. This is what I think is right, so you do it like I say. But when we begin to see students as volunteers in the classroom, as a partner in the learning, then I shift how I do all of my instruction, regardless of the how my instruction gets conveyed, whether I am a remote teacher, a hybrid teacher, or face to face. When teachers and students come together and partner, and we learn from each other, no matter if they're 5 or they're 15, then I think you have a completely different situation. And I've seen that shift a lot this year. A lot of everyone working together, and kind of back to faith emotional side. I've seen relationships between teachers and students and parents just be tremendously, maybe I remember the right word, to have be, they've grown in those relationship skills of how to connect with one another, how to build that culture in a way that's that safe place that then allowed them to get to the learning. So I've seen a lot of really cool things that have promoted lots of growth this school year that maybe it's hard to see because we're still in it.
You said what I was going to say, Michelle. So
So let's look at stage 7. And we've been talking about this, reflecting on instruction, which practices are most effective with our students. We've been talking about that on the entire time. But let's go ahead and highlight and pick one that we want to see go to next year. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go first, because in a conversation I had with an educator recently, we can turn distance learning back into what it was originally intended to, which was reaching a wider audience more efficiently. Distance learning has been around for 20 years. They've had entire rigs set up on it. It's a different thing. You can bring in interesting and exciting people from across the world into your classroom if they're vetted, and if you and you can also reach people that you couldn't normally do. So like we were talking about Saturday STAR practice sessions, bringing kids in to the school on a Saturday in a low socioeconomic situation and trying to get them to get ready for STAR. Okay, so everything we were talking about was bribery. Let's feed them. Let's give them extra credit. It was like, well, wait a minute. What if instead of moving the mountain to us, what if we move to the mountain? And distance learning gives us that opportunity. Okay, we're going to have a Saturday session on Zoom. I know you don't like Zoom, and I know we're face to face, but this is an opportunity for you to go without having to worry about getting a ride, having to worry about getting up too early and all of that stuff. You just do it there, and then we can give you resources to go from there. It's not throwing away all of this stuff that we've got, but it's using it in a more poignant situation. Because you think about it, the kids that we generally want to move that little step in STAR, to move them from meets to masters, to move them from approaching to meets, they need a little more support. Outside the school day is the way to do it, because during school day we need to do instruction. I would love for tier 1 instruction to handle all of this, but kids sometimes need a little extra. So giving them virtual distance opportunities to do that would be easy. Teachers could do it from home. Districts wouldn't have to worry about facility usage. They could get the resources and apply it from there.
I'm going to push back a little bit on that, David, because I think that some of the students that may need that particular support, there might be things that keep them from engaging virtually. So it might be lack of access. It might be they've been doing Zoom all year and they've opted out. So I could still do that on a Zoom situation on a Saturday and say, yeah, I was there. but I'm giving it the same level of focus I did all year in school. So to me, it's like that could reach some students, but we still, it's to me the concern, and I hear this concern from a lot of people, is that like the kids that in a classroom, they might, I might be able to cajole them a little bit. Are they here? You're here anyway, we'll do this thing that I'm asking you to do, that I don't have that opportunity to do in a distant situation. So it's there. Michelle used this term and I love it: volunteer. They're a volunteer student. So I have to think about different ways. So one way might be that I could have that, but maybe I offer a different way that they can access that information. And the whole point of what she was talking about earlier is that engagement, is that meeting, thinking about what's going to meet them where they are, and not about what's easy for me or what my plans are. And like, right, it's about really understanding the needs of the student.
I
Well,
agree.
and
I think honestly, it's about accessibility. We want to get more. So distance learning could be a tool to reach more. I don't think we need to look for werewolves in mathematics, because there are no magic bullets to kill them. So like we're going to need multiple strategies to close gaps, identify kids, and help them. We now have a workforce that is entirely trained on it.
well, and I think this, okay, so check this out. When you say distance learning, I started thinking about homeschool programs. A homeschool program it can be online, but it's already pre-scripted. This is a lesson. This is what we're doing. These are the resources you need. And this is what's happening today. This is happening tomorrow. And it just moves. And you can move at the pace. And all you're doing is checking off lessons. I did this lesson, this, and then, and you're just checking off. There's really not a ton of feedback or, opportunities to really find the gaps and fill the gaps, right? You're just completing a bunch of lessons. So I think sometimes distance learning, the approach may be similar. Well, here is my year at a glance, and these are the lessons I'm covering today, and this is what you're doing. And they see it as a quote unquote program, right? But I think what I think both of you are also saying is that if I need to meet with a student, maybe in a small group on a Saturday for maybe some extra support, tutoring, whatever you want to call it, some extra support, or after school, then that is not pre-programmed. It's not already done. It's taking what the students give me and seeing how I can move them forward. So I think that's the difference between distance learning and what we can use Zoom or Teams for. I think there's a difference, and how do I see it, right? Because when I was in high school a while back, distance learning, I was in a very small school, and we, didn't have a ton of people, but they brought in distance learning so we could take college classes. And it was a great opportunity for us to have dual credit in a way, because we didn't have a college campus within a 2-hour driving distance for us. So it gave us opportunity as high schoolers to get dual credit. It was fantastic. But it has evolved since then because it needed to evolve. But I have a retired teacher friend of mine, and every Sunday she plans and she tutors kids from all over the United States on different time zones and different things. Now she's primarily like a English language arts teacher. So most of her tutoring is in writing or reading or things like that on the elementary side, but she even does middle school and high school. But she has met with, and she individualizes her tutoring time for these students that she can engage with at a time that works for them. And she has seen tremendous growth in those students that has allowed her to provide services in a way that was different, but it was definitely based on the students. So I've seen, kind of to David's idea, I've seen that go really well with retired teachers that have really stepped in to fill some of those places that always need to be filled. Always. I can go on a district website right now and there's always a job vacancy for tutors. Always.
Well, I think you got it right, Michelle, when you said that you're meeting them where they are. But what I guess when I was hearing David a little bit, I was thinking of the tradition of it, like the old way of thinking, but we're trying to adapt our way. And so to me, it's like, what we used to do is say, oh, well, we have kids who need work on objective one. So we're going to plan this day for objective one, and the kids are going to come and they're going to do what we say, or what we think they need. The way you were saying it was like where I think that we do need to keep that shift. Like if I am saying, if I sit down and say, okay, we are working on objective one, and we have that conversation, and I'm able to meet your need, and you're not doing just 5 more problems on objective one from a practice book, right? But we're really getting to that thing that you need. I think that can be very effective, but that can be done face to face. It really is about access, going back to David's point too, of, do I have access to be there? Does virtual provide more access for me to be there, or is it less, access? So it's getting that both, like the meeting the needs however they need it to be.
I see it more virtual and distance is flexibility.
Mhm.
We can be flexible,
Yes.
asynchronous, synchronous, distance, hybrid. It's just flexibility. So like in a situation like you're talking about, Faith, where kids don't have access to broadband and don't have reliable technology, they could open up a school facility for them to go to. For kids that are rural, who maybe have access to broadband, but the drive time is so far, and they're also middle school grades and high school, they can have access to it. It's just flexibility, and I think that's the, for lack of a better term, the magic bullet that Zoom and distance learning can provide is flexibility to a problem. The problem that was expressed to me in that situation was getting kids to physically be there, and for me it was like, well, why? Next year, fingers crossed, schools will reopen, more kids will be face to face, and we're going to need flexibility. We will. And so group, if we're doing objective one and some kiddos we've identified as needing help on it, we open the opportunity for them to do it and then work with them on it. And it wouldn't necessarily be completely ideal, structured student by student, but it wouldn't be definitely just a blanket approach. It's, we're working on concepts and skills in this objective, and we're going to give you support on it. And that can change from week to week. And we identify different sets of kids who have struggle in different objectives or different concepts, and then we work it that way.
Well, I think what you're saying, David, is right on. Is this the flexibility is like, I think we can no longer move forward in education like we don't have virtual needs. We saw this year that we do. We have the need that, even when someone is absent, like you were saying earlier about your daughter, that we need a way to help students when they can't be at school, or when they need to be able to watch that thing again one more time on a video. Those are the things that we're hoping that we continue to use to provide that flexibility, I think, is what we're all saying. Maybe I'm wrong.
And I think if we start planning for that now, moving forward, and like we are going to do this moving forward, I honestly think with a plan and having that as a part of our schema, I think we're going to get some really powerful results. And when we get to the other side of all of this, because it's not going to be 1 year, it's going to be multiple years. We're going to have a more dynamic workforce, teachers. We're going to have a far more adaptable population and students. And when they get to college, where hybrid is the norm, not the exception, it's going to be very powerful. Our kids are going to be ready to go. Some of the biggest changes for kids is when they get to college, it's totally different. And now you put in distance learning on top of it. So,
well, like you said, David, this technology has been around for 20 years, but we as education system in general have ignored it for a large part, because we are comfortable. We were very comfortable, and we couldn't imagine really things a different way. So what in this crisis that we've been through this year, and maybe still in the midst of, right, that we now have kind of been forced to make some adjustments, and hopefully that little that change, we don't throw it all out, and that we keep the good. And that's what we're talking about, right? We're trying to talk what is the good, and what will help us, even if we're all back face to face, which I think we won't be. I think we'll still have people who want that virtual experience, or that the flexibility that it provides. And I think about some, even since we talked about emotional, some of the emotional things are, if I have a student who maybe is being bullied in face-to-face situations, then having that option of him or her still being able to get the education that they need, without that emotional stress that might happen, at school, at a face-to-face school, is going to be something parents want. Some of them won't. Some of them are going to be happy. I saw some videos about how happy they will be to drop their kids off at school the first drive away. But I think that when they think really about what their student really needs, what their child really needs, it'll make a difference in the long run.
Well, I know that we talk a lot about 21st century skills, and a lot of the research and from jobs out there, when they look at what qualities they're looking for in their new hires, their college graduates, a lot of those skills are the things that we're experiencing right now. As educators, we've always kind of been, charged with how can we help students develop these skills, or they call them soft skills, however you want to refer to them. Well, this year has been a great year to really look at. Now we have some tangible things that we can look at and go, wow, this did a really good job at helping students in this area. And I think that maybe that's one of the takeaways too, is that we're all going to come out of this better than we came into it. And skills have been sharpened, and we've begun to see new strengths, and we begin to see things that maybe aren't our strengths, and that's okay. But maybe I have a teammate, or I've learned to find that strength in somebody else. So my collaboration skills have increased dramatically, because now I'm getting the opportunity to rely on multiple people in ways that I haven't had to just yet. And I think that's going to be really cool to see as we move forward, in the years to come, when research comes out and we get recent data from our college graduates and jobs, and are they coming with the skills that they're looking for the jobs that, we hear it all the time that we don't even know are going to exist. How are they coming to them better prepared, simply because we've been pushed in a way to help foster that skill set just a little bit more. So
I've been reading this book called The Infinity Game, and one of the companies and the scenarios that they talk about in the book is Kodak. And Kodak didn't adjust to the technology of the electronic picture. They were a film company. They did really well. They were on top of things when we were using film, and they didn't want to adjust to digital picture taking. They didn't think people would want to look at pictures on their phone or digitally. They resisted basically adapting to it. And we've been able to resist in education for a long time, but now I don't think we can anymore. So I'm hoping that that as we move forward, that but I'm hearing a lot of people who say they can't wait to get back, and they don't ever want to be on Zoom again. And so I'm really hoping that over the summer, when they get time to relax and really reflect, like we've been doing today, on those good things that did occur, leave the bad, take the good, that next year and all years after could be a little brighter for everyone.
Well, that's one of the things I hope stays, just to kind of add to what David was asking, is, you know, for asynchronous professional learning, where there's short, bite-sized learning opportunities that they can enter in at their own pace. And I know we've had Canvas for a while, so that's not necessarily a new idea, but I do think we've seen more participants engage in them, and they're seeing the value of being able to access it in when they're in their cognitive space that allows them to learn the best. So they have choice in where that learning environment is for them, and they have choice in when they engage in it. And that's fantastic, because I hope that that stays, and that teachers will continue to find those opportunities to really build their own toolbox in ways that now they have more choice, because we have more offerings that are smaller, that allow them to be a little bit more customized or personalized. And then I can engage in them when I want, and I can demonstrate my learning in multiple ways. No longer, I hope, this is just Michelle speaking, that I think there's value in 6 hour long professional learning sessions, but I also think there's value in these shorter ones too, and not having to drive and fight traffic and the weather and bad accidents and all that. And I hope that that's what I think Zoom is great for too, is when we have options to eliminate those outside stressors. But I also think just asynchronous professional online learning is good too, where it's interactive, because I think that that is something that will help us in ways that hasn't necessarily been something that we've been accustomed to doing really up until this year. So I hope that that's something that continues to grow and improve and get better.
Well, that's all we have time for today. We had a great conversation about closing out the year and reflecting on some awesome things that we did and some things that we are not going to do again. So I want to wish everyone a successful conclusion to this year. Pay attention to the stuff coming out of Region 11, particularly our 2 Pi R conference on June 28th. Follow us on Twitter at R11MathNow, where our motto is
Professional learning.
Anytime.
anywhere.